There's a resource that we all have that not many entrepreneurs tap into, often because either they don't know it's an option or don't know how to do it. This resource is the body, really a gateway to inner wisdom. When you are able to tap into this resource, you will navigate your business from a more grounded, wise, and intuitive place. You'll be in alignment. And when this happens, you will be able to draw your ideal clients to you with greater ease, prioritize with greater clarity, and be able to serve in more effective ways, ways that truly help your clients more deeply than you thought possible. In this episode, we'll explore how tapping into the wisdom of your body is essential and how to do it, as well as how to spot the difference between acting from fear and intuitive guidance. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self-Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD-ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing, and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. I want to start this episode out with a story and something I was reminded of throughout this story. I am in the process, if you've been listening, you might have caught it. I'm in the process of writing a book. It's actually a journal book and part of a journal book experience I'm creating, which will be out in several months. So keep your eyes open, ears open. But through this process, was reminded of the importance of tuning in to the body. This happened, let me back up, a couple months ago. I was in a state of busyness, pretty intense busyness, something I often recommend against. If you listen to me, you're like, Jen, you tell us not to do that because it dysregulates your nervous system. And I'm not wrong. It did dysregulate my nervous system. Some of it was planned and some of it was things just happening that needed attention, including things in my personal life, like my grandma dying and another family member being in the hospital for a prolonged period of time, and travel for my entrepreneur business, all that kind of stuff. At any rate, my plate was fuller than full, and lots of those things had to get done. But one of the things that needed to be done was writing this book. And I was having a hard time starting it. Don't get me wrong. I knew what I wanted it to be. I was clear on that. I knew how I wanted it to help. And I even had pieces written down on scraps of paper about things I wanted in it. But I could not get myself to sit down and start writing. And some of you might be like, well, because it wasn't due till January to your editor, so that's probably why. That could be a piece of it. In all honesty, from my perspective, a lot of it was twofold, and they're kind of related. One, because I was in this state of busyness, I was really dysregulated more often than not all day, every day, but I was dysregulated when I was working way more than I usually am, which meant I was in my fight or flight response. That was the kind of dysregulation I was experiencing. You could also be experiencing shutdown. And if you've been listening for a while, then you know that when we are in those protective responses, our fight or flight response or our shutdown response, the only priority for our body, our brain, is survival. So it's really hard to access creativity needed to write a book when you are in that fight or flight response more often than not. And I know all that cognitively, and usually I'm really good at practicing what I preach. And sometimes things get so full that I can find myself in an old cycle of pushing and hustling and busyness. While this was happening, and actually for several months now, I want to say probably like almost a year, And I relate some of this to perimenopause, actually. I've been noticing it takes me longer to transition from sleeping to waking. Some of that might be ADHD, some of it might be perimenopause. But what I've been noticing is I have a hard time when my alarm goes off immediately jumping out of bed and getting going like I used to. And I was a little worried, wondering, am I getting depressed? Is there something else going on here? Am I sick? And I've been paying attention to it and realizing, first of all, with perimenopause, I just need more sleep, but also that there is some value to that transitional space, that space between sleep and wakefulness. And I didn't quite know how valuable it was. But even a month and a half ago, when I was probably almost 2 months ago now, when I was wanting to start writing my book, really start writing it seriously, like not just the random notes here and there. While I could not get myself to sit down and actually write, in that space between sleepfulness and waking, I started to have ideas flowing to me. And so I keep a notepad by my bed with a pen, and I would grab it, and of course, I don't have my glasses on at this point, so I would, write whatever I could on the page and try and make the most sense out of it as I could later. Sometimes I'd put it in a note on my phone if I could figure that out when I was half awake. And what was coming out of that was true wisdom. It felt like it hit hard, like it was really resonant with not just myself, but with others like you who I intend to serve and do serve. And I was reminded about the value of slowing down, creating space for silence, creating space for rest, and the importance of listening to the body. But when you're running around busy, when you're in your fight or flight response, it's really hard to tune into that wisdom. It's hard to hear those messages. It's hard to even notice the messages coming from your body. And again, it's because when you're in those protective responses, your body and brain are focused on survival. Accessing creative ideas, not a priority. If you've read Elizabeth Gilbert's book, oh my gosh, I can't remember the title all of a sudden, something magic. It'll come to me later, perhaps. Maybe not, though. Perimenopause, I don't know. Or Rick Rubin's book on creativity, they both talk about this creative energy, this spark that comes almost from the other side, and at least from your deep intuition, but possibly from something bigger. I want to talk about that and get into that today because when we can tap into our bodies, we can tap into that intuition. And if you believe divine wisdom, if you're like, I don't know, I think that's a bunch of crap, I highly recommend Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, it might be called. Specifically, I remember one of the parts in it that she talks about. She had this idea for a book, a fiction book that she was going to write. And she had the full idea exactly. And the time it came to her wasn't the right time to write the book. And then 2, 3 years later, she saw this book that came out that was exactly down to the characters and the plot what had come to her. And she hadn't told anyone about it. It's not like this person stole from her. And the way that she talks about that is that creative ideas need a way to get out. These ideas from the universe, these creative ideas, divine ideas, if you will, are just trying to find their medium. And when we are tuned in and open, they can come to us, but then we need to act on them, right? Rick Rubin, he talks about the same thing in his book. If you don't know Rick Rubin, he produced a bunch of bands, my favorite of which is the Beastie Boys. So rock on. But he talks about the same thing. And if you ever heard Michael Jackson, sometimes he'd say, oh my gosh, I had this great idea and we have to do it right now. And everyone would be like, why do we have to do it right this minute? And he would say, so Prince doesn't. Like there was this recognition that there's this intuitive, creative guidance and wisdom floating around for those of us who create things, services, products, music, books, content, podcasts. There's this guidance that comes from the other side, but you have to both be open to receiving it, know how to receive it, and then act on it. And a lot of times we end up shutting off to that because we get stuck in our busyness. We get stuck in our to-do list. We even get stuck in vacillating between our protective responses of fight or flight and shutdown. So I want to talk today about how to tap into this wisdom. For me, I notice that it requires me slowing down. Now, in all my busyness, those ideas still found their way to me. It was just that when my body wanted to be waking up or sleeping more, whichever one, all these ideas were coming to me. And I know to be grateful for those ideas. So I wasn't like, shut up, I'm trying to sleep. I was grateful. And I wasn't creating space elsewhere in my life for those ideas to flow to me. Even my meditation, which is at least 10 minutes of me sitting on a cushion meditating and is a quiet time, was filled with tasks coming into my head. Oh, yeah, make sure you do this, make sure you do this. And I would try and refocus my meditation on my breath or the mantra I was chanting, depending on which part of my meditation I was in. And the tasks would still keep coming. It was just almost relentless, but I still kept meditating. Sometimes that can be a place where those ideas come to me. But the most effective way I have found to have these ideas come to me is by sitting in the silence, by creating space in my day to be bored and just sit. No music, no distractions, just sit and be open. It can be uncomfortable at first if you're not used to it, and sometimes you'll notice some mind chatter. And if you have complex trauma, I should say, if it gets too intense, you always can open your eyes to titrate the dose of it because maybe it can be, you might be like, oh, there's some stuff coming in that doesn't need to be there right now. So proceed with caution if that's your situation. And if you choose to do this, when you sit in the silence, 5-10 minutes, and then free right after, you are giving space for these ideas to come to you. For whether you consider that a part of you with great ideas, whether you consider that your highest self, your true soul self coming to you with ideas, or whether you consider this some kind of divinely guided download. That information can only come to you from a place of stillness and silence. I find that one of the best ways to find truth in situations, to find resonance, is to tune into the body. The body is an incredibly powerful tool. It's a vehicle for our soul, if you believe in souls. But it's also an incredibly powerful tool to the business owner. It can help you connect with what's in alignment for you, what's truth for you. And all it requires is for you to listen and get to know your body. So I want to take you through an exercise that I originally learned at an EMDR conference, the National Andrea Conference in 2016, from a woman named Deborah Luttrell. And it's about finding truth by tuning into the body. So I want you to say to yourself, my name is, and then say your name. Notice what that feels like in your body. Does it feel like a lightness? Does it feel like an openness? Does it feel more like heaviness or constriction? Chances are, unless you really hate your name or the people who gave it to you or whatever, unless you have some kind of problem with your name, chances are there's a lightness there, an opening, because that is truth. That is your body saying, yeah, that's true. Now say something that isn't true, like, my name is dirt. Notice what that feels like in your body. There likely is a sense of constriction, a sense of heaviness. This is an indication that what you just said is false. What's cool about this is that's just the test to get to know what your body feels like when you're having a experience of truth or an experience of something that's not aligned. And the reason this is important is you can use this to help you with decisions in your business. So you could say, I am writing a book. And I am writing a book. And even before that, I could feel the lightness in my body about that happening and see what that's like. Where if I say to myself, I'm offering a super high ticket offer that's $12,000 a year, I immediately feel constriction because that feels out of alignment for me. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's not something that's bad or people shouldn't do. It's just not my truth. It's not something I am aligned with doing right now. And who knows, that may at some point resonate. But what this can do is help you find the truth in your body. And you can also take the information from this stillness and run it by your body and say, I am. Say it like you're doing it, or I'm going to do this, and see what it feels like in your body. See if it resonates. See if it feels like truth. Oftentimes it does, because that can be inner wisdom coming through. It can be divine wisdom coming through if you believe in it. One of the ways that we can figure out if this guidance that comes from within is actually more intuitive guidance or divine guidance versus anxiety or fear is to notice what it feels like in your body. So, if in a meditation, if in the space between sleeping and waking, if in times that you sit in stillness and free, you have things that come to you. And if it feels like there is a lightness in your body about it, then that's probably truth. That's probably intuition. That's probably coming from something bigger. But if instead it feels like a ball of anxiety, or gosh, as I said that, I felt it in my chest and my stomach, if it feels like tension and heaviness, then that is coming from a part of you that is afraid. That might even be coming from a part of you who feels desperate. And so, as you navigate your business and your life and try to figure out what is in alignment and what is instead more fear based and then likely to be ineffective, you can tune into your body because it will tell you. And ultimately, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I believe these are parts of you. These are parts of you communicating that they're scared, if that's what's coming up for you. But when it feels like that ooey gooey, soft lightness, that warm, almost tingly feeling, that's what self energy feels like. That's what your highest energy feels like. That's what it feels like to be connected to something bigger. And it's that guidance that will never leave you astray. It's that guidance when you put it out into the world that will help people in amazing ways that you never thought possible. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We stepped a little bit outside of some of the stuff I usually share, but this is some of the stuff I do myself and I'm really into. So if you liked this episode, be sure to share. And I'd love it if you comment, even if you're like, wow, didn't like that one, Jen, feel free to comment. I'd love to know. And if you haven't already, please review this episode and make sure to follow. Take care, and I'll see you next time.